So for question 1, which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? This could be the introduction, the first section for the critical reading portions of the exam. My advice is to, before you answer, to try to predict what word would appear before looking at the answer choices, so you don't get thrown off or distracted by a possible trap that the SAT, that College Board likes to set. So we have botanist AK has pointed out that maple trees already thrive in a wide variety of climates and thus may blank changes in climate better than some other species do. Let's keep reading. The alterations maples may undergo in response to a changing climate are likely to be relatively small and easily achieved. So my guess is that the maple trees are able to deal with changes in climate better. So let's go through the answer choices. Relocate from does not make any sense, so I'm going to cross it out. Refer to also doesn't make sense in this context. Originate from changes in climate better doesn't make any sense. This is probably the best answer. Maple trees already thrive in a wide variety of climates and thus may adapt to changes in climate better than other species do. I'm going to select D and move merrily along. Great. We're doing great, team. As used in the text, what does the word clear most nearly mean? And my advice is, if there's a sort of a prompt or a excerpt introduction before a text or paragraph, to read that as appropriate context. The following text is from John Muir's 1913 autobiography, blah, blah, blah. Muir describes being on a boat. The water was so clear that it was almost invisible, and when we floated slowly out over the plants and fishes, we seemed to be miraculously sustained in the air while exploring a veritable fairyland. This seems pretty obvious. The water was so transparent. None of the other choices make sense. It's definitely, the water was not simple. The water was not understandable or obvious. Transparent is definitely the best answer choice. Let's continue. The recently observed gamma ray burst, GRB, lasted for 200 seconds. Blank for a burst generated by the merger of neutron stars. Bursts caused by neutron mergers typically last fewer than 2 seconds. So that's a lot longer than 2 seconds. So I'm thinking that this is some sort of extreme or peculiarity. So let's look through the answer choices. It was not a coincidence, or there's no indication it was a coincidence. It was not a reprieve because it lasted for 200 seconds, so that's kind of the opposite of a reprieve, or like a rest or break. An incident doesn't really make sense in this context, but it definitely was an oddity, because if ordinarily the neutron mergers last for fewer than 2 seconds, the fact that it lasted for 200 definitely is an indication that this was an oddity. select that and continue. And continuing. Question 4. In 1776, the United States sent Benjamin Franklin to France to try to win the country's support in the United States' fight for independence from Great Britain. Franklin was very popular in France. This blank surely helped him to convince France to assist the United States. So France definitely was pro Franklin, so let's think of go through the answer choices and see which is the best answer. This thoughtfulness, that's not exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to strike that. This esteem, that sounds like a good answer choice. It sounds like it's probably the correct answer. You hold someone in high esteem, that means you hold them, you respect them. Controversy and sincerity don't make sense in this context. B is the answer. Let's continue. For question 5, it asks, which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? In the 1950s, scientists didn't know much about the ocean floor. Many scientists at the time believed that the ocean floor was mostly flat. Okay, it's expanding upon what little they thought. But, and this is a crucial transition to note that there's a indication of a change. But geologist M.T. and her research partner, Bruce Heason, provided that this idea was wrong. Using sonar data collected from the Atlantic Ocean, T and H show that the floor was filled with canyons, mountains, and valleys. So let's go through the answer choices. But it seems like the underlined sentence, as it relates to the text as a whole, establishes what the previous thinking was, and which is now is debunked based on the research from T and H. A. It identifies the scientific belief that Tharp and Heason should be wrong. That sounds precisely correct. It describes the design of Tharp and Heason's experiment. We don't know about an experiment. They didn't talk about it, so nope. It emphasizes a disagreement. Nope. It presents data to support a claim. There's no data. It's just the conclusion. So A is definitely the correct answer. We have another function of the underlined phrase in the text as a whole question. Let's do it. In the early days of television in the 1940s, many people thought that U.S. television programs would rely on financial support of ad agencies and commercial sponsors, much like radio did. But advertisers hesitated to jump into a new space, particularly at a time when the manufacturing of new television sets was stalled due to the U.S.'s involvement in World War II. Broadcasters like the NBC needed to persuade advertisers to support their programming despite not knowing whether there would be a robust television audience to begin with. So it seems like the underlined phrase is highlighting a qualm that advertisers had in terms of going all in to the TV at the time of World War II in the 1940s. So does it compare the beginnings of radio programming with the beginnings of TV programming in the U.S.? It mentions the radio, but I don't think that's the best description of the function of the phrase. Gonna rule out A. It identifies a specific reason behind some advertisers' hesitance to support television. Definitely, because they're uncertain about whether there would be a robust television audience to begin with. The advertisers were hesitant to, invest time, money, into this new medium of the television. Definitely think B is the correct answer. Let's move on. Which choice best describes the main purpose of the text? Let's think big level. Petropods are small swimming snails with thin, delicate calcium carbonate shells. These animals are thought to be especially vulnerable to ocean acidification due to calcium carbonate's susceptibility to dissolution at low pH levels. Victoria L. Peck and colleagues recently found that the periostracum, a protective coating on petropods' outer shells, prevents this dissolution when intact. Moreover, the team was surprised to discover that even when the periostratum is breached, petropods can still mitigate damage by rebuilding the inner shell wall. So it seems like these petropods are pretty resilient, despite the concern that they're fragile little snails. So let's look through the answer choices. Was the main purpose to call for additional research? Definitely not. Nowhere in the text did it mention that. To discuss the conclusion drawn in the study of calcium carbonate's role in protecting the periostracum of petropods. Maybe we'll hold this, but I don't think that's the primary point, the main purpose of the text, because it goes on to explain other factors that contribute to the resilience of the petropods. To address some of the ways ocean acidification has altered petropod behavior over time, there is no discussion of that. That's definitely not the correct answer. And D, to present findings that suggest that a concern about the effects of ocean acidification on petropod shells may be unwarranted. I definitely think this is the correct answer. Yeah, it definitely resonates with these little guys being resilient and able to survive despite acidification of the ocean. Let's continue. So now we have two comparative texts. Based on the text, how would the author of text 2 most likely respond to what some researchers contend as described in text 1? So in text 1, little is known about how plate tectonics, wherein slabs of Earth's crust move over, under, away from, and against one another, began. Some researchers contend that tectonic movements began around 3 billion years ago, often noting that computer models of Earth's mantle temperature at the time indicate that the mantle would have been sufficiently molten to enable the plates to move. Okay, so they're emphasizing the use of computer models. They come up with this time frame of 3 billion years as to when plate tectonics basically started. In text 2, excuse me, ultimately, any plausible claim about the inception of tectonic movement must rest on empirical evidence from the geologic record. Researcher WC and his team analyzed the geochemistry of zircon crystals to gain insight into the chemical composition of the magma from which the crystals had formed, and, based on the data, compellingly argued that plate tectonics may have been occurring as early as 4.2 billion years ago. So it seems like in text 2, they're taking a totally different methodological approach in terms of estimating when plate tectonics began on Earth. They're arguing that it was 4.2 billion years ago, and that's evidenced empirically through geochemical analysis of zircon crystals. So how would the authors of text 2 most likely respond to text 1? By suggesting that the temperature of Earth's mantle 3 billion years ago was likely insufficient to allow for the level of tectonic movements predicted by computer models. That does not seem to be a sufficient rationale and description of a criticism. And mark that as no. By distinguishing between computer models of Earth's mantle temperature that reliably predict the onset of plate tectonics. No, text 2, again, they're not talking about temperature, they're talking about empirically using empirical data from the geochemical composition of crystals. B is out. By indicating that computer models of Earth's mantle temperature are still being improved such that new models, no discussion about being improved. D, by asserting that a more definitive form of evidence than computer models suggests different timeline for the onset of plate tectonics on Earth. That definitely sounds like the right answer. They said that we need empirical evidence. D is the correct answer. Let's go. Which statement about M. robustus in the octopus garden is best supported by the text? In 2018, scientists discovered an immense aggregation of MR pearl octopuses along a hydrothermal vent 3,200 meters beneath the ocean surface. Water temperatures at the site, named the Octopus Garden, seems appropriate, climb as high as 11 degrees centigrade, much warmer than the ambient 1.6 centigrade typical at this depth. Based on observations made over 3 years, scientists concluded that temperatures at the site likely confer reproductive benefits and that the site is exclusively for reproduction. 6,000 M. robustus adults, hatchlings, and eggs were observed at the garden, but no juveniles were present. That seems important. So, which is best supported by the text? M. robustus leave the octopus garden upon reaching an intermediary stage of development. That definitely seems like it's correct, since if they're at the intermediary stage, they're not adults, they're not hatchlings, and they're not eggs. I'm going to select A and call it a day. We can mark this for review and come back if we have extra time, but I'm pretty confident with this. Let's move on. Which choice best describes the main idea of the text? Conservationists worldwide are working to protect ecosystems from habitat destruction and biodiversity loss, and in many cases, initiatives that rely on natural features or processes can help address such challenges. In response to a rapidly dwindling population of blueback salmon, the Indian nation partnered with the conservation organization's Wild Salmon Center to restore naturally occurring log jams in the Quinault River. The log jams create shady pools where the blueback salmon can rest and spawn, thus promoting blueback population recovery. So let's look through the answer choices to see which may be the best main idea of the text. A partnership between the Quinault Indian Nation and Wild Salmon Center shows the importance of collaborative approaches to preserving biodiversity. I think that's too specific, because if we look at the very first sentence to this passage, it seems quite high level and just general. Conservationists worldwide are working to protect ecosystems from habitat destruction. It doesn't seem to be particularly focused on the specific example that exemplifies the trend, but I don't think this is the main idea. Nature-based approaches can be effective ways to achieve conservation goals. That seems broader, and it seems like that would be the correct answer. I'm going to select this, mark it for review, and come back if we have extra time. Which choice best describes data from the graph that support the researcher's conclusion? Alessandro, blah blah. The presented study participants with vignettes about fictive political candidates, portraying them as embodying a personality trait widely considered admirable, e.g., agreeableness, or one considered ignoble, like cynicism. A survey recorded participants' ratings of the candidates' likability and showed that across participants, ignoble trait candidates were less likely than admirable trait candidates were less likable than admirable trait candidates. However, when the researchers factored in the participants' own personality traits on a scale of 1, least ignoble, to 7, most ignoble, they concluded that this relative ranking of candidates persisted except among the participants with high ignobility scores. Okay. That's a lot. So let's go through the answer choices. There's a strong positive correlation between participants' ignobility scores and admirable trait candidates' likability ratings, but there is no correlation between ignobility scores and ignoble trait candidates' likability ratings. That second half doesn't seem to be correct, so I'm going to rule A out. B says participants with an ignobility score of 5 or less rated admirable trait candidates as more likable than ignoble trait candidates, whereas participants with an ignobility score of 6 or more rated ignoble trait candidates as equally likable or even more likable than admirable trait candidates. That seems to be the case. If we look at the line with the squares, ignoble trait candidates, that's upward sloping. Participants with ignobility score of 6 or more were equally, if not more, likable than admirable trait candidates. That is, they graphed higher than the admirable trait candidates. So B appears to be the best answer. I'm going to select that and move on. excuse me, which finding, if true, would most directly weaken the underlying claim? Puerto Rico is an island in the Caribbean Sea. Indigenous people there started raising guinea pigs around 1700 years ago. GPs had originally been domesticated much earlier in both Colombia and Peru. So were guinea pigs brought to Puerto Rico from Colombia or from Peru? Ancient Caribbean trade routes connected Puerto Rico with Colombia, but not with Peru. Therefore, guinea pigs in Puerto Rico probably came from Colombia and descended from guinea pigs. So we need to find something that would weaken the underlying claim. Let's look at answer A. Ancient guinea pigs in Puerto Rico were generally less similar to ancient guinea pigs in Colombia than to ancient guinea pigs in Peru. That definitely seems like it would be the correct choice. Let's select that and move on. For question 13, which finding, if true, would most directly support the researchers' hypothesis? Ad recall measures how memorable an advertising campaign is. To provide advertisers with information about ads' memorability, a social media site regularly surveys users about whether they remember ads they had recently interacted with on the site. In a study that drew on this survey data, researcher Sussman and colleagues noted that different kinds of social media interactions involve different levels of cognitive engagement. Commenting on or sharing a post is more cognitively demanding than is clicking on embedded links or on a like button. That seems important. Now, here's the hypothesis. The researchers hypothesized that interactions indicating high levels of cognitive engagement with ad content would result in relatively high levels of ad recall. So, high levels of engagement, which, according to Sussman and colleagues, would be commenting on a post or sharing a post, those would be more engaging engagement. So let's look through the answer choices. Users who interacted with an ad were much more likely to do so by clicking on the ad's like button than they were to interact with the ad in any other way. That's directly stated as it's not supported by the text. Users who interacted with an ad were significantly more likely to purchase the advertised product. Nothing about the passage talks about purchasing the actual product. It's just about engagement, so that's out. Compared with users who clicked on links in an ad, users who commented on that same ad were significantly more likely to remember seeing the ad when surveyed 2 days later. This is correct. If we look back to the text, explicitly delineates between commenting or sharing a post as more cognitively demanding than just clicking or liking a button. So C is the correct answer. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the statement? A student is researching rotating radio transients, rats, a subclass of pulsar stars characterized by short pulses of radio waves. Okay. The time between consecutive pulses of a rat is referred to as a period. Okay, cool. A03 has the shortest amount of time between consecutive pulses of all the rats in the table. That seems to be correct because that has the shortest period in seconds of all the rats. So A is the correct answer. Let's move on. Which choice most logically completes the text? Okay, let's see what the author is trying to argue. Narwhals are shy whales that live in the remote Arctic Ocean. Some of them have a long tusk, like a unicorn horn, with sensitive nerves. Narwhals are known for this tusk, but many actually don't have one, and its purpose is unknown. Well, that's weird. One group of scientists came up with a possible purpose in 2014. The scientists suggested that the tusk may help narwhals determine when water around them is starting to freeze, is likely to start freezing and become dangerous for them. Marine biologist KL disagrees with that idea, though. She reasons that if the narwhal tusk serves such an important purpose, then it's most likely that they all should have tusks. Like, if this is like crucial to their survival, wouldn't they all have them? Let's go through the answers. A, some narwhals would seek a new habitat. It's not usually how it works. A is out. Fewer marine animals would also have tusks. Totally not covered by the text, just completely inappropriate. B is out. More narwhals would have a tusk. That seems to be correct. Let's look at D just to indulge me. Narwhals become less shy over time. It's cute, but I don't think that's the correct answer. C is definitely correct. Let's move on. Now we're on to the grammar section. Here's a really good, useful strategy. If the answer choices are all different, the conjugations of verbs, and there's one that's in the singular versus plural, that's probably the correct answer. So in this case, that would probably be B. Let's read. Music originated in the French Creole community of southwestern Louisiana. One instrument that gives Zydeco its unique sound is its veste-flautoir. The veste-flautoir is a wearable washboard that's played by rubbing spoons. Yes, it's a singular object, singular verb. Let's go. Let's see. So it looks like here the one standout answer choice is C, because it doesn't have like a modifier before. Let's see. Let's read. Featuring jagged peaks of black ink surrounded by hazy swirls of blue and green paint, ZD's painting Panorama of Mount Lu is inspired by the tradition of Qinglu Shanshui, a type of Chinese landscape painting characterized by the use of blue and green hues to depict ethereal, otherworldly landscapes. This definitely is the correct answer. Otherwise, if we try inserting the other choices, it's just going to have too many verbs in the sentence. So, either we'll probably need to separate two thoughts or not. So let's read the passage. In his work, Pliny the Elder praised Hipparchus's Star Catalog, a 2nd century BCE list of roughly 850 celestial stars, or different stars' celestial positions. For centuries, scholars dreamed about locating a copy of his legendary lost work. Period. That fantasy partially became reality in 2022 when researchers uncovered traces of the star catalog on a pamphlet set, or reused parchment. Yes, C is definitely the correct answer choice. Otherwise, the other choices would lead to just run-on sentences, which would not lead to the correct answer. With a blend of traditional design elements, such as arched Gothic ceilings, and modern ones, such as floor-to-ceiling windows. Okay, we can't use the semicolon because it's not a complete clause or independent clause by itself. There's no other hyphen or dash within the passage, so B is out. Again, C is not possible. What we've read so far is not a complete sentence, so D is the correct answer. So it looks like we have a singular versus plural battle going on here. When a given industry, singular, water and electricity are two well-known examples, carries high infrastructural startup costs and other barriers that discourage competition, blank of just one or two suppliers per municipality. Such industries are known as natural monopolies. So A and B are out since the industry is a subject. So it's down to C or D. C, I'm going to mark this for review, but C seems to be the appropriate answer. Yeah, this specification does not seem to be the best use of English, so I'm going to choose C, mark it, and move on. Transitions. Let's get the flow of the passage. Famous for its 4-degree tilt, the tower is a popular attraction in Bologna's city center. However, measurements taken in 2023 showed that the tower was rotating in a concerning way. Consequently, as a result, yeah, B seems like it would be the best answer choice because as a result of the rotating in a concerning way, they closed down the area around the tower and explored solutions to stabilize it. Guard cells are specialized cells that are part of a plant's pores. These cells help regulate the amount of carbon dioxide a plant takes in. Blank, they help regulate a plant's water loss. Okay, so the amount of carbon dioxide it takes in and the plant's water loss seem like two separate ideas. So I think additionally it's going to be the best answer choice. because it's just adding additional details about the use and the purpose of guard cells. Duchamp intended his 1917 so-called ready-made sculpture fountain to challenge then prevailing conceptions about the nature of art. Indeed, in fact, Duchamp's fountain did just that, raising the question of whether displaying any object in an art gallery could be said to transform the object, even as Duchamp's sculpture was a urinal, into a legitimate work of art. Yeah, indeed, just seems like the best answer because it's just emphasizing as to why his work challenged then prevailing conceptions about the nature of art. A model developed by astrophysicist Zucker and her team revealed that the same supernovas responsible for the creation and ongoing expansion of the local bubble, a 14 million old cavity in the Milky Way, are likely responsible for the formation of new stars. Blank, this model detailed how the bubble's expansion trapped interstellar clouds of gas and dust that became stars upon their eventual collapse. This seems to be describing the specific way in which the cavity in the Milky Way led to the collapse of these stars. So I believe that D specifically is the best answer choice. Beautiful. Okay, now the student notes questions. I find that I do not read the notes first. I first see if I can answer the question and just look at the answer choice. Because sometimes it just, the content will just be the correct answer. So let's try it out. The student wants to contrast to the song Poor Miner's Farewell with the song Bring Him Back Home. Which choice most effectively uses information from the notes to accomplish this goal? The songs PMF and Bring Him Back Home both raised awareness about human rights violations. No, because those are noting similarities. You need to contrast the songs from one another. While both are protest songs, Poor Miner's Farewell is about coal miners in Kentucky, whereas Bring 'Em Back Home is about the anti-apartheid leader Nelson Mandela. Bingo, we got it. A student wants to present the conclusion of Jen Wang and colleagues' 2016 study. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? So without any additional detail describing the conclusion, we're going to have to look to the notes. And if we look at the very last bullet point, in the notes, Wang and colleagues determined that the dogs first acquired these mutations by interbreeding with Tibetan wolves around 24,000 years ago. And these mutations enable the dogs to withstand hypoxic, that is, low oxygen conditions at high altitudes. Okay, let's go through the answer choices. Like Tibetan Mastiffs, Tibetan Wolves can withstand hypoxic conditions at high altitudes. Okay, yes, but there are more notes which say, let's look at all the notes. Tibetan Mastiffs are large dogs native to the Himalayas. A mutation in their gene prevents excess hemoglobin production. Mutation in their gene boosts hemoglobin's oxygen carrying ability. And notably in the study, here we go. In a 2016 study, Wang and colleagues noted that Tibetan wolves' DNA has the same EPA S1 HBB mutations. That seems quite important. Let's look at D. By interbreeding with wolves around 24,000 years ago, check, that's good, Tibetan Mastiffs acquired the genetic mutations that enable them to withstand hypoxic conditions. Great. So let's continue with Section 1, Module 2 for reading and writing, with the sentence completions. At the turn of the 20th century, black residents of Richmond, Virginia had few formal options for banking and other financial services. To blank this situation, Magdalena Walker chartered the blah 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 bank in 1903. So I'm thinking of some word to ameliorate, to address, and so let's look through the answer choices. To prolong, that doesn't make any sense. To rectify, that sounds like it could definitely be an option. To retain, that would continue the issue. And to highlight, no, that's definitely not it. B is the correct answer. Let's move on. The creation of LR's animated film, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, was blank process. Over the course of 3 years, R and her collaborators painstakingly made more than 250,000 individual images of hand-cut paper silhouettes and repeatedly had to invent entirely new methods and tools to create the special effects R envisioned. It seems like this was very hard, and just glancing through the answer choices, arduous seems like the best answer. Ineffectual means just not strong, not effective. Contentious is quarrelsome, biting. Haphazard is just random. So D, arduous is the best answer. Diadromous fish migrate between freshwater and marine biomes during their life cycle. The migrations obligate nature is why fish can blank those that are merely euryhaline, able to tolerate high salinity. And I'm guessing that this colon is going to be signaling some important clarification, definition. So let's pay attention here. The euryhaline black-chin tilapia can survive high salinity, but its life cycle does not involve relocation to a different biome, as does that of diadromous wild salmon. So it seems like the passage is just delineating between the tilapia and its ability to survive high salinity and not have to go to a different biome, whereas that's not the case for the wild salmon. In this case, I think demarcated from would be the most appropriate answer choice, because that it's the closest to meaning distinguished. Definitely. One popular theory of the origin of the moon, the Big Whack, posits that a protoplanet called Theia collided with Earth, flinging debris into orbit that eventually coalesced into the moon. Until recently, Theia was blank. But researcher QU and colleagues now claim to have identified pieces of the protoplanet in the lowermost section of the Earth's mantle. So it seems to me the passage is suggesting that Theia was just sort of like a theory, or like a rough idea. Um, and so just looking through the answer choices, notional seems like it would be the best choice. It was just sort of there's a notion that this could possibly be correct, and uh, just looking through the other answer choices, desultory, spurious, and veritable just don't make sense in this context. So I think D is the best answer. Let's move on. Poetry. We all love poetry questions, don't we? Honestly, don't freak out. If you just take a deep breath and just read slowly, you should be fine. Let's go. Let's do this. Which choice best describes the function of the characterized portion in the text as a whole? And so let's read this little blurb at the top before the poem begins. The following text is from H.G.'s 1916 poem, Midday. Also, pro tip, be conscious of the titles of works of fiction, or even just titles of charts, because that can signal a clue as well. In the poem, the speaker is on a path in an outdoor setting. A slight wind shakes the seed pods. My thoughts are spent. As the black seeds, my thoughts tear me. I dread their fever. I'm scattered in its whirl. I'm scattered like the hot, shriveled seeds. So I'm guessing that even before just looking at the answer choices, is that this is sort of the natural environment is just sort of a metaphor or representative of the speaker's inner sense and inner feelings. So, with that in mind, let's look through the answer choices. A. It illustrates a change in the natural environment that the speaker implies is responsible for the growing misgivings described in the text. So there's no change described in the natural environment, so A is not the correct answer. It establishes an example of consistency in the natural landscape that the speaker then contrasts with the unpredictability of human emotions. Also, it's just not discussed in the poem. There's no discussion about the unpredictability of human emotions. B is out as well. It presents an observation of an occurrence in the natural world that the speaker then expands on to convey a sense of a turbulent interior state. This seems to be the best answer choice. A slight wind shakes the seed pods. This is, a sense of, tumult and disorder, and which is just serves as a metaphor for the interior state of the speaker. Let's hold C, and just to make sure that D is incorrect, it evokes the ordinariness of an event in nature to suggest that the critical self-evaluation the speaker engages in is a common pursuit. There's nowhere in the text that it's talking about this being a common pursuit or this being ordinary, so D is definitely not correct. C is your best answer. Let's move on. Which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? So for these, I would suggest reading the entire passage. The Bayeux Tapestry from 11th century France depicts 75 scenes over 250 feet of fabric. It was likely produced by workers embroidering in sections and then joining the resulting panels together. It's plausible that the workshop that produced the tapestry had never produced one so large, and some researchers claim that a close examination of the joins, the places where the panels are stitched together, suggests that the workers developed and refined their joining process over the course of production. So it seems to me that the joins are pretty significant to this passage. As we read on to the underlined sentence, the text reads, for example, the first join the workers completed exhibits a clear misalignment of the borders of two panels, whereas the latter joins are virtually invisible. So to me, this shows that over the progression of time and working, the workers and artisans that were responsible for assembling the Bayeux Tapestry, over time they became more proficient and skilled in making these joins and making them seem less perceptible. So let's look at the answer choices. It identifies the people and events depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry, not discussed by the text at all. A is out. It supports an argument about the workers who produced the Bayeux Tapestry. Yes. I don't know if this is the best selection, so I will hold it, but let's continue reading the answer choices. It compares the Bayeux Tapestry with other tapestries from 11th century France, definitely not correct. It describes how researchers determined where the Bayeux Tapestry was produced. That's also not correct. So it seems like B is the best answer choice. I'll flag this to return just in case we have extra time, but I'm pretty sure that B is the best answer. What does the text most strongly suggest about the story of Hans Castorp? This little blurb reads, the following text is from Thomas Mann's novel The Magic Mountain, translated by Woods in 1995. The story of Hans Castorp that we intend to tell here, not for his sake, for the reader will come to know him as a perfectly ordinary, if engaging, young man. It seems kind of basic, but for the sake of the story itself, which seems to us to be very much worth telling, although in Castorp's favor, it should be noted that it is his story, and not every story happens to everybody. It's a story that took place long ago and is, so to speak, covered with the patina of history and must necessarily be told with verbs whose tense is that of the deepest past. So if I had to provide just a high-level summary, it seems like The Magic Mountain is a story about this Hans Castorp, who seems to be pretty ordinary, but the story, it's the greater story, is beyond ordinary. It's remarkable. So let's look at the possible answer choices. Though it is true that stories of even the most uninteresting people are themselves interesting because all people are unique, the reason the story is interesting is nonetheless difficult to understand because of the passage of time. This is not discussed at all in the text, and it's also just using really extreme words and adjectives. Even the most uninteresting people, all people are unique. This is just not supported by the text. A is out. Even though it is a story of a person of no particular importance, its age and the manner in which it therefore must be told are both indicators that the story itself is important. So this, I would argue this is sort of like a trap answer choice. It's picking up on elements that are described within the passage, but just conflating them with what is really factually described. There's no discussion about how the age and manner in which the story is told are indicators that the story itself is important. B is incorrect. Like all stories about the lives of inconsequential people, didn't say that he was inconsequential. It said that he was ordinary. So, every word in the answer choice matters. C is out. Which leaves us with D. Let's see if this makes sense. It is a remarkable story that happened to an unremarkable person, though one could plausibly argue that because the story is valuable, some of its value accrues to the person at its center. This is really well supported by the text. D is definitely the best answer. Let's move on. Which finding, if true, would most directly support the researcher's conclusion? Excuse me. Early Earth is thought to have been characterized by a stagnant-led tectonic regime, in which the upper lithosphere, the outer rocky layer, was essentially immobile, and there was no interaction between the lithosphere and the underlying mantle. Researchers investigated the timing of the transition from a stagnant lid regime to a tectonic plate regime, in which the lithosphere is fractured into dynamic plates that in turn allow lithospheric and mantle material to mix. Examining chemical data from lithospheric and mantle-derived rocks ranging from 285 million to 3.8 billion years old, the researchers dated the transition to 3.2 billion years ago. Excuse me. So it seems like we should be finding evidence 3.2 billion years ago and earlier to support this theory about the tectonic regime and the interaction between the lithosphere and the mantle. Let's look at the answer choices. Among rocks known to be older than 3.2 billion years, significantly more are mantle-derived than lithospheric. But the opposite is true for rocks younger than 3.2 billion years. So this is not really pertaining to the purpose or like the discussion of the text. Because we want it focuses on the interaction between the lithosphere and the mantle, and this does not adequately address it, so I don't think A is the correct answer. Mantle-derived rocks older than 3.2 billion years show significantly more compositional diversity than lithospheric rocks older than 3.2 billion years ago. So this is like the opposite of what they're arguing. So it really, again, should be uh, rocks dating from 3.2 billion years ago and younger should be indications of compositional diversity from like the interaction and the mixing of mantle and the lithospheric rock. So B is out as well. There's a positive correlation between the age of lithospheric rocks and their chemical similarity to mantle-derived rocks, and their correlation increases significantly in strength at around 3.2 billion years old. Again, this is not capturing, this is like the opposite of what they're saying. There's not like a gradual positive correlation with time and the age of lithospheric rocks and their chemical similarity to mantle-derived rocks. 3.2 billion years on and earlier is when we see this change. C is out. Let's see if D is the correct answer. Let's hope. Mantle-derived rocks younger than 3.2 billion years contain some material that is not found in older mantle-derived rocks, but is found in older and contemporaneous lithospheric rocks. This is the best answer choice because it does discuss how there's mixing of lithospheric rocks, and it's distinguished from the older mantle-derived rocks, which are not heterogeneous. So D is the best answer. Which finding from the study, if true, would most directly support the researcher's conclusion? Excuse me. Almost all works of fiction contain references to progressions of time, including the time of day when events in the story took place. In a 2020 study, Alan Kim, P, and SS claimed that an observable pattern in such references reflect a shift in human behavior prompted by the spread of electric lighting in the late 19th century. The researchers drew this conclusion from an analysis of more than 50,000 novels spanning many centuries and cultures, using software to recognize and tally both specific time references, that is, clock phrases such as 7 a.m. or 2:30 p.m., and implied ones such as mentions of meals typically associated with time of day. So, okay, so with like the advent of electricity, in literature and fiction, there are indications that there are changes in human behavior because of the revolution that electricity brought on. So let's look at the answer choices. Novels published after the year 1800 include the clock phrase 10 a.m. less often than do published before the year 1800 do. I don't think this is the best answer. Also, let's keep in mind that, excuse me, within the text, it's indicating that electricity really just came about in the late 19th century. So we want a time frame that's later than just the beginning of the 1800s. So A is not correct. Novels published after 1880 contain significantly more references to activities occurring after 10 p.m. than do novels from earlier periods. This seems like a great answer. It's happening later in the 19th century, and because of electricity, more activities are able to occur after 10 p.m. because they don't have, there's light. They're not restricted to doing activities in daylight. I'm going to pick B, and we can return if we have extra time. I'll mark it for review. With that, I'm going to take a quick break. Okay, and we're back. Which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to complete the statement? We have this complicated graph, but it's not that complicated. The text reads, in a study of urban physical expansion, blah 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 conducted a meta-analysis of more than 300 cities worldwide to determine whether urban land expansion ULE was more strongly influenced by urban population growth or by growth in GDP per capita, a measure of economic activity. Because efficient national government is necessary to provide urban services and infrastructure that attract economic investment, M et al. Propose that absent other factors, the importance of GDP per capita growth to ULE would likely increase relative to the importance of population growth as governments became more efficient. If true, this suggests the possibility that, and so let's look at let's look at the graph. If we look at what occurs in region 1 between the first period 1970 to 2000 and then to 2000 and 2014, we see that yes, GDP per capita growth declines. So that's the opposite of what they're describing in the text. So let's look through the answer choices to see what would possibly make sense. National governments of countries in Region 1 experienced declines in efficiency in the period from 2000 to 2014 relative to the period from 1970 to 2000. Well, that kind of makes the most sense because the text says that in order to have government efficiency, you need to have growth in GDP per capita. As GDP per capita declined in Region 1 between those two periods, this would be the best answer. I'm going to select answer A, mark it for review, and come back later. Which choice best describes data from the graph that support the student's assertion? So let's look at the assertion. A student is researching the Chinese government's 1992 shift to a market economy that emphasizes trade liberalization. One mean of trade liberalization involves expanding from ordinary imports, this first cluster, into an emphasis on processing imports, which have two types. Processing with assembly, in which a firm obtains raw materials from a foreign trading partner without payment and sells the final goods to that partner, charging for assembly, and processing with inputs, in which the firm expends capital to buy raw materials from a trading partner, processes them into final goods, and sells those goods to whichever trading partner it chooses. The student asserts that while initial efforts at trade liberalization were shaped by Chinese firms' limited capital, this situation resolved during the 2000s. Okay, so since the text is describing how in processing with inputs, the firms it's necessary for them to expend capital to buy raw materials. If processing with imports grows or increases over the 2000s, this would suggest that the Chinese firms are overcoming initial periods of limited capital. So let's look through the answer choices. Processing imports with inputs were greater than both ordinary inputs and processing imports with assembly in 2006. This doesn't seem like the best answer choice because it's only just indicating 1 year into the 2000s as opposed to like a trend across the 2000s. So I'm gonna rule this one out. From 2000 to 2006, processing imports with inputs rose much more sharply than processing imports than assembly did. This looks like, if it's true, to be exactly what we need. And this is exactly the case. We can see very clearly the last three, the cluster furthest to the right, processing with inputs does rise much more sharply. They're able to use their own capital, so the problem resolved in transitioning to a market economy. B is correct. Which most logically completes the text? The Uto-Aztecan language family is divided into a northern branch, which includes the Shoshone language of present-day Idaho and Utah, and a southern one, whose best-known representative is Nahuatl, the language of the Aztec Empire in Mexico. Lexical similarities across the family, including of botanical terms, confirm descent from a single language spoken millennia ago, and the family's geographical distribution suggests an origin in which is in what is now the U.S. Southwest. However, vocabulary pertaining to maize isn't shared between northern and southern branches, despite the crop's universal cultivation among Uto-Aztecan tribes. Notice how, however, set off this began this sentence. So this is a pretty good indication that this is a critical turning point, and that we should be paying attention. Given archaeological evidence that maize originated in Mexico and diffused northward into what became the U.S. Southwest, some linguists reason that my guess is going to be that that these two different these two different branches or groups of people separated prior to maize coming into the picture. So let's look through the answer choices and see what's the best answer choice. A. Northern Uto-Aztecan tribes likely obtained the crop directly from a southern Uto-Aztecan tribe rather from a non-Uto-Aztecan tribe. There's no mention about non-Uto-Aztecan tribes. I'm going to rule A out. Variation in maize-related vocabulary within each branch. Okay, there's Sorry, let's continue. Variation in maze-related vocabulary within each branch of the Uto-Aztecan family likely reflects regionally specific methods for cultivating the crop. Um, this could be it. I don't have any strong objections at this point, so let's hold that. Southern Uto-Aztecan tribes likely acquired maize at roughly the same time as northern Uto-Aztecan tribes did, though from different sources. No, this is not exactly what I'm predicting. I'm predicting that the two tribes separated before maize came into the picture. So C is out. And D says the family's division into northern and southern branches likely preceded the acquisition of the crop by the Uto-Aztecan tribes. This seems to be the best answer. This is what I was looking for. Let's select D and move on. Which choice most logically completes the text? For its 1974 work, Instant Mural, the Chicana art collective ASCO taped members Valdez and Sandoval to an outdoor wall in East LA. The work is manifestly a commentary on constraint, but many critics focus on Valdez and the social constraints women faced at the time, which is understandable but leaves the presence of Valdez's male collaborator, Sandoval, unexplained. We should instead consider that in 1974, the arts establishment recognition of Chicana artists was, and had long been, restricted to socio-historical muralists, leaving non-muralist Chicana artists, like ASCO's members, struggling to even exhibit their work. Attending to this context opens an interpretation that accounts for all the evidence, and allowing us to conclude that. Let's go through the answer choices. While Valdez's presence in Instant Mural represents the social constraint placed on women at the time, okay, this is not the best answer. The text is saying that there's an incorrect focus on the constraints of women as opposed to the ability to be recognized, like, for diversity across the Chicano art collective beyond just like murals. So A is out. Excuse me. The main subject of Instant Mural is female Chicano artists' experience of being doubly constrained by gender role expectations and marginalization of certain types of art. Again, no, this is not what the text is arguing. It's saying that Chicano artists, regardless of gender, really have been sort of like pigeonholed into being represented or having their art, the art that's associated with them, be constrained to murals and to artists being muralists. It does not have to do with the plight of women. B is that. Instant Mural is a reflection on constraining aesthetic expectations placed on Chicana artists in general rather than on social constraints placed on women specifically. That sounds like it could be pretty good. Let's read D. Instant Mural is best understood not as a critique of the social constraints placed on women, but rather as a critique of socio-historical muralist depictions of Chicana culture. This is not correct because it's not about a critique of socio-historical muralist depiction of Chicana culture. So C is the best answer. Let's select that, move on. Which choice most logically completes the text? An analysis by Eli and colleagues of coins minted in Sidon the 5th and 4th centuries BCE reveals a change in their composition over time. While a coin from circa 450 BCE contains about 98% silver and 1% copper, a coin from 367 BCE, the end of Baalim's reign, contains 74% silver and 24.7% copper, giving it a relatively yellowish appearance that traders would have noticed. Because coins with a silver content below 80% were widely considered unsuitable for trade, E et al. Speculate that a crisis in confidence in the currency occurred in Sidon around 367 BCE, which was likely relieved despite Sidon's persistent oppressive financial obligations as a result of Baa's successor Ab's decision to blank. Okay, so it seems like the crux of the issue is that the percentage of silver in the coins has been diluted, so how can we ameliorate this? A says, proclaim that the percentage of silver in coins suitable for trade would be raised to a threshold higher than 80%. This would not help because that's not currently where the coins, the percentage of silver in the coins is at. It's below 80% right now. A is out. Keep the amount of silver in Sidonian coins consistent with that in coins minted in 367 BCE, but decrease their weight. Okay, this seems to make the most sense, because if you keep the amount of silver constant, but you reduce the overall weight of the coin, the percentage of silver is going to increase, and so it's hopefully going to be above 80%. So I think B is the best answer. I'm going to flag this for review and move on. Grammar. Nigerian American artist T.O.O. uses black ink pens to create highly detailed drawings of human figures. Her portrait of novelist Zadie Smith is displayed in the National Portrait Gallery in London. We don't need a comma. Perfect. Move on. A government body officially known as the Althing. So we need the subject to immediately follow here. The world's oldest parliaments include one. Nope. A is out. Iceland's parliament is one of the oldest in the world. First meeting in 930 CE. That seems like it's probably the correct answer. The first meeting of one of the oldest parliaments in the world, Iceland's, was in 930 CE. No, this doesn't work. 930 CE doesn't work. It has Iceland's parliament has to immediately follow this introductory clause. As the 14th U.S. Librarian of Congress, C.H. has many responsibilities. These include overseeing the Library of Congress's collections, which boast more than 162 million items. So as I scan through the rest of the text, I see another semicolon. and semicolons can be used to separate items in a list. So let's see. Would C make the most sense? These include overseeing the Library of Congress's collections, which boast more than 162 million items, managing the U.S. Copyright Office, which registers copyright claims and advises on copyright law, and appointing the U.S. Poet Laureate. This is perfect because it's separating items in a list, and it maintains the parallelism of the use of the semicolon throughout the sentence. Recently unearthed Neronian tools in France, dating to 54,000 years ago and attributed to H. sapiens, may provide evidence that interactions between Neanderthals and modern humans occurred 10,000 years earlier than previously supposed. A finding that, if true, would overturn current theories about H. sapiens migrating during the Upper Paleolithic. So we definitely need some sort of punctuation here. So C is out. And the thing is that a comma would be the most appropriate since we're not talking about two separate clauses. So, which is in the case of A and B. So D is the correct answer. Digital artist Lulu Chen primarily uses a suite of software tools to create illustration for children's books. To manifest the warm and welcoming atmospheres that are a signature of her To manifest the warm and welcoming atmospheres that are a signature of her work, though, she occasionally relies on more traditional art techniques such as painting with watercolors. So A looks like it's going to be the best choice because to manifest the warm and welcoming atmospheres that are a signature of her work, though. Right, because that this is the beginning of the sentence, which is not an independent clause by itself, so we can use those commas. Let's move on. Chondrites are stony meteorites that are undifferentiated. That is, the contents may not have melted and separated into distinct layers. They are hardly pristine, though. Semicolon? Let's see, is the following an independent clause? Because that would justify the use of the semicolon. They are hardly pristine, though. Many chondrites experience aqueous alteration as a result of exposure to fluids, as well as fracturing, veining, and localized melting due to collisions with other objects. My guess was correct. We need that semicolon. Let's move on. That the geographic center of North America lay in the state of North Dakota was conceded by all involved. Establishing its precise coordinates proved more divisive. So we can't use B and C are out because these are two independent clauses that we're joining. And I believe that the semicolon is going to be the most appropriate as opposed to the colon, because the second clause is not like going on to explain a claim from the first. So D is the correct answer. Transitions. Following the American Revolutionary War, North American foodways underwent a radical transformation, fueled in large part by spiking consumer demand for certain grains. The cultivation, trade, and transportation of maize and wheat, well, they love their maize on this college board exam, blank reconfigured the continent's existing regional foodways into a globally oriented food system. It seems like this is specifically or particularly calling out the trade routes for maize and wheat, so it seems like in particular is the best answer choice. Let's move on. When printing paper money for the colony of Pennsylvania in the 1730s, B. Franklin, then a Philadelphia shop owner, took steps to combat the circulation of counterfeit notes, such as weaving blue threads and muscovite, a reflective mineral, into the paper he used. Blank, he stamped the notes with detailed imprints of sage leaves that proved difficult for forgers to replicate. So this doesn't seem to be a continuation of the previous point, talking about the muscovite. It seems like an additional action that he used to prevent the circulation of counterfeit notes. So moreover would be the best choice. The student wants to identify what type of scientist Chaudhary is. Which choice most effectively uses information from the notes to accomplish this goal? She's a sedimentologist, period. Be right back. Amazing last two questions. 3. The student wants to indicate the year Yosemite Falls was completed. Which choice most effectively uses information from the notes to complete this goal? It was completed in 1930. Period. Done. The student wants to present an overview of the study's findings. Which choice most effectively uses the notes to accomplish this goal? So, since we don't know the study's findings, we're going to have to look through the notes. Although we can do an initial walkthrough to see which one provides an overview of the findings. The 2021 study determined the information rate of 17 languages. All right, home stretch team. The student wants to present an overview of the study's findings, which most effectively uses relevant info from the notes to accomplish this goal. So we can take an initial survey to see which one provides a possible overview. A, the 2021 study determined the information of 17 languages in bits of information conveyed per second. That seems possible. But if you look at the notes, it says the IR, or information rate, was found to be approximately consistent across the 17 languages studied, an average of 39 bits per second. So it seems like there are additional details, so I don't think A is the best answer choice. B says researchers found that information was conveyed more quickly in Spanish at 7.7 syllables per second. In terms of an overview of the study, I think this is too specific and is not the correct answer. Vietnamese have the 16th fastest syllable rate, lower than that of Spanish. Again, just really too specific to be the best answer choice. And D is, though some of the languages differed in the number of syllables spoken per second, all 17 conveyed information at roughly the same rate. That seems to be the most comprehensive overview of the findings from this 2021 study. D is the best answer choice. Last question. The student wants to place Einstein's argument within its historical context. Which choice most effectively uses info from the notes to accomplish this goal? Let's see. A. During the dawn of quantum theory, Einstein maintains the independent reality of some subatomic particles, subatomic entities, although Bohr's opposing interpretation would become the widely accepted view. So this seems to be a good answer choice. It's placing Einstein's argument within its historical context during the dawn of quantum theory. I'm going to select A, but let's look at the other answer choices just to make sure. At the 1927 Solvay Conference on Physics, Einstein disagreed with Bohr's argument that subatomic entities like electrons had a reality independent of observation. So it's not entirely clear whether that was what was argued at that specific conference, so I don't think this is the best answer choice. So I'm going to rule out B. The attendees of the 1927 conference were among the preeminent scientists of their era, including Einstein, who opposed Bohr's proposal. This doesn't really place what Einstein's argument was. C is not the answer. In 1927, Einstein and Bohr engaged in the famous debate. Bohr's argument, later called the Copenhagen interpretation, would remain popular decades after. So again, this fails to really capture what Einstein's argument was. So I'm going to rule out D and keep A. And with that, y'all, congrats. We made it to the end of the second module on critical reading. Let's enjoy a 10-minute break and regroup. Thanks. Hey guys, let's pick right back off where we were and start the first math module. Lorenzo purchased a box of cereal and some strawberries at the grocery store. Lorenzo paid $2 for the box of cereal and $1.90 per pound for the strawberries. If Lorenzo paid a total of $9.60 for the box of cereal and the strawberries, which of the following equations can be used to find P, the number of pounds of strawberries Lorenzo purchased? Assume there is no sales tax. Okay, so let's try to convert what we're told. So we're told that he bought a box of cereal for $2. So we're not going to need any variable in front of that for that. And we're trying to solve for the number of pounds excuse me, of strawberries, which were $1.90 per pound. And we're told that the number of pounds of strawberries is represented by P. If he spent a total of $9.60, A definitely seems like it'll be the best answer choice. we don't need a variable in front of the 2, and the 190 is a coefficient for the number of pounds of strawberries. Let's move on. The function f is defined by f of x equals 25x plus 30. What is the value of f of x when x equals 2? So in order to solve this, we simply just plug in 2 for x. So 25 times 2 is 50, plus 30 is 80. C is the answer. Bingo. The graph shown gives the estimated value in dollars of a tablet as a function of the number of months since it was purchased. What is the best interpretation of the y-intercept of the graph in this context? So the y-intercept is going to be when x equals 0, x being time. So this will be when the value of the tablet at the time of purchase. If we look at the answer choices, that's captured by choice A. The estimated value of the tablet was $225 when it was purchased. We're doing great. Which value is the solution to the given equation? So we have the absolute value of p plus 61 equals 65. So this is a pretty simple one. 4 should be, just kind of screaming at you, because the absolute value of 4 is 4, plus 61 is 65. Triangles EFG and JKL are congruent. Let's see, I'm going to try to draw this. One sec. So we have EFG. Why my pencil's not working. JKL. They're congruent if E is 45 and the measure of angle F is 20. What is the measure of angle J? Well, if we know that they're congruent and E corresponds to J, then this is also just going to be 45. Bingo. During the first part of an experiment, a ball was launched from a 7-foot-tall platform. The graph shows the height y in feet of the ball x seconds after it was launched during the first part of the experiment. During the second part of the experiment, the ball was launched the same way, but from a platform that is 2 feet shorter than the first platform. Which of the following graphs could represent the height y in feet of the ball x seconds after it was launched during the second part of the experiment? So for this representation, instead of starting at the platform of 7 feet, it's going to be 2 feet shorter. So 7 minus 2 is 5. And so it should be the same shape, but at the y-intercept should be 5 rather. A is not the correct answer choice since the y-intercept is at 4. B looks like it's correct because it's the y-intercept is 5. This for C it's higher, and D even higher. B is our correct answer choice. The ratio x to y is equivalent to the ratio 9 to 5. If the value of x is 162, what's the value of y? So we have x divided by y equals 9 over 5. And in this case, we know that x is 162. So we can just cross multiply 162 times 9, but take the quantity and divide by 5. Sorry, 162 times 5 divided by 9. 90 is our answer. Gorgeous. At a state fair, attendees can win tokens that are worth a different number of points depending on the shape. One attendee won S square tokens and C circle tokens worth a total of 1,120 points. The equation 20S plus 90C equals 1120 represents the situation. How many more points is a circle token worth than a square token? So we can just look at the coefficients for the circle and the square token, since the circle token is 90, whereas the square token is 80, we just take the difference. So it's 90 minus 80, which equals 10. Excuse me. What's the solution to the given equation? So here in this example, we're able to just cancel out these terms. So the x plus 9 will cancel on top and at the bottom. So we'll be left with x minus 9 equals 7. So as a result, x equals 7 plus 9. 7 plus 9 is 16. Voila. The equation 12t plus b equals c relates the variables t, b, and c. Which of the following correctly expresses the value of c minus b in terms of t? Hold on one moment. I'm back. Don't worry. So if we just subtract b from the left side of the equation, we have 12t equals c minus b. 12t is the answer. What is an x-coordinate of an x-intercept of the graph of y equals 3 times the quantity x minus 14 times the quantity x plus 5 times the quantity x plus 4 in the xy plane? So we have 3 different choices. I'm just going to choose the first one that appears, and so we have 14 as a possible answer choice. This is just like asking for like what the zeros are of the function, so pretty easy. The function f is defined by f of x equals 5 times the quantity 1/4 minus x squared plus 11 over 4. What is the value of f of 1 over 4? So this is gorgeous and convenient since when we plug in 1/4 into for x, the 1/4 will just cancel. So we have f of x equals 5. The 1/4 will cancel one another, so it's 5 times 0 squared. 0 squared is just 0, so this entire term is 0, plus 11 over 4. Our correct answer is 11 over 4. A circle in the xy plane has the equation x minus 13 squared plus y minus k squared equals 64. Which of the following gives the center of the circle and its radius? So we should know from the equation of a circle that x minus h squared plus y minus k squared will give us the center at the point h comma k. So the center will be 13 comma k, and the radius, the right side of the equation for the equation of the circle, is the radius squared. So we'll need to take the square root of 64, which is 8, which makes A the correct answer. A circle has a radius of 2.1 inches. The area of the circle is b pi square inches, where b is a constant. What's the value of b? Well, that's super simple. All we have to do is square 2.1, which is the radius. Pi r squared is the area of a circle, so the value of b is 4.41. Notice it's not asking for the area of the circle, just what the value of the constant b is. During a study, blah blah blah, What was the average rate of change in degrees centigrade per minute of the recorded temperature of the air in the chamber from x equals 5 to x equals 7? So if we look at x equals 5, here I'm going to go over to my annotate. So we go from the point 5, 14 to 7, 24. If we take the change in y, 24 minus 14, which is 10, and the change in x, 7 minus 5, which equals 2, the average rate of change is 5 degrees centigrade. Boom. The solution to the given system of equations is x comma y. What is the value of 39x? Let's go back. So if we simply add as is, we'll get 3y plus 3 negative the 3y and negative 3y will cancel, so we'll get 0 equals 13x minus 6. If we add the 6 over to the left side of the equation, we'll have 6 equals 13x, and then multiply by 3, we'll get 18x equals 39y. 18 is the correct answer. The function f of t equals 40,000 times 2 to the t over 790 gives the number of bacteria in a population t minutes after an initial observation. How much time in minutes does it take for the number of bacteria in the population to double? So we should recognize that this is an exponential growth function, and specifically has to do with the amount of time it doubles. So if we look to the exponent, after 790 minutes, then the initial population of 40,000 will have doubled, because 40,000 times 2 to the first is just times 2. So 790 is the correct answer choice. Gonna move over. So if you can notice, we have this the same term reappearing. So what we can do is add 8 times the quantity 2 minus 4x to the left and have f plus 2 minus 4x equals 16. and then we will subtract the 5 from both sides and just get $11. Whoop. A scientist studying the life cycle of dragonflies. Let's go back. A scientist studying the life cycle of dragonflies counted the number of dragonflies in a certain habitat each day for 46 days. On February 15th, there were 99 dragonflies in the habitat. The percent increase in the number of dragonflies in the habitat from Jan 1 to February 15th was 12.5%. How many dragonflies were there in the habitat on January 1st? So I think that the easiest way to solve this is to guess and check. And so if we take A, for example, and multiply 88 by 1.125, which is the equivalent of increasing by 12.5%. If that equals 99, then this would be the correct answer. So let's go. Let's see. 88 times 1.125 equals 99. Boom. We got it. We're almost there, guys. One solution to the given equation can be written as 8 minus the square root of k over 4, where k is a constant. What is the value of k? So this is a great question. It looks a lot trickier than it actually is, but this is just using the quadratic formula. So we know the quadratic formulas. Excuse me. So under the discriminant, we have, excuse me, for the square root of k, k is just going to be equal to b squared minus 4ac So the value of k would be 64 minus 4, 2, negative 7, so we have 64 minus, we'll end up just, this will just become positive. So it's 64 plus 8 times 7. 8 times 7 is 56. $670 should just be 120. Pretty sure that's correct. We'll flag it just in case. move on to the next. The function f of x is defined as 19 more than 4 times the number x. So f of x equals 4x plus 19 what is the best interpretation of the x-intercept? So when y equals 0, that's when we can solve for the x-intercept. So 0 equals 4x plus 19. We can subtract 19 and bring it over to the left side. So negative 19 divided by 4 equals x, which is represented by a. When f of x equals 0, the number is negative 19 over 4. Cool, last one. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to sine 24 of 24 degrees times cosine of 66 degrees plus cosine 24 degrees times sine of 66 degrees? So I think the easiest way to solve this is to see if we go into, make sure you can see this, using the Desmos calculator, we have to make sure that we're in degrees and not in radians, because you have to, if you notice, we have degrees, the little circle, as opposed to radians. So we can use this information, we can calculate what this is equal to, that given expression, excuse me, and see which answer choice equals that same value. So you have sine of 24 times cosine 66 and plus cosine of 66 times sine of 24, yeah? Sorry, cosine of 24. Good thing I caught that. Sine of 66. And this equals 1. Sine 24 cosine 66 plus cosine 24 sine 66. Yeah, so let's look at the answer choices. Um, I'm going to guess C initially. And so what we can do is take the quantity of cosine of 66 squared plus cosine of 24 squared, and that equals 1. Boom. That's the correct answer. And sweet, we're done with the first module of the math. Let's go on. So let's continue with module 2 of the math section. Question 1. The bar graph summarizes the charge in kilowatt hours a battery received each day for 15 days. For how many of these 15 days did the battery receive a charge of 0 kilowatt hours? So all we have to do is simply look at the first bar in the chart. So for 6 days, it received a charge of 0 kilowatt hours. Boom. Number 2. In the given scatter plot, a line of best fit is for the data is shown. Which of the following is closest to the slope of the line of best fit shown? So we can just take a rough estimate. I see that we have a point of 0, 1.5, and also 7, 14.5 ish. So to calculate the slope, it's the change in y over change in x. So we'll have, excuse me, 13 over 7, and that will be closest to 2. It's not exactly going to be 2, but it's definitely going to be greater than 1. So D is the correct answer. Let's continue. 3. In a sample, 80% of the items are faulty. There are 88 faulty items in the sample. How many total items are in the sample? So the way that we can think about this is that we can either think of it as a proportion, or say that 0.8, and so we can represent the total items in the sample as x. So 0.8 times x should equal 88. So x should equal 88 divided by 0.8. Bust out my TI-89 titanium. 88 divided by 0.8 is 110. Great. Let's continue. 4. For the exponential function g, the table shows 4 values of x and the corresponding values of g of x. Which equation defines g of x? So all of them have in the y-intercept of 1. So all of them are expressed just simply to the x, that doesn't help us very much. However, if we let's try plugging in the point 1 comma 1 over 25 into D, for example. What would g of x equal if we evaluate 1 over 25 to the 1? It would equal 1 over 25. And what if it equals 2? That should also equal 1 over 25, 625. And if x equals -1, then it should just be the inverse of 1 over 25. So it looks like, to me, D should be the correct answer. I'll flag this, but feel pretty confident. Let's continue. 8x equals 6. What is the value of 72x? So if we multiply 8x by 9, that if we can think of this as a proportion. So 72x should be 9 times more than 8x. So if we multiply 6 times 9, that should equal 54, which is our correct answer choice. 6. Which expression is equivalent to blah, 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 where h is greater than 0 and q is greater than 0? So let's recall the rules of exponents in a rational expression. When you have the same base, you can subtract the exponents in the denominator from the numerator. So we'll have h 15 minus 5 and q of 7 to the 7 minus 21. So this should equal h to the 10th and q to the should be better in my mental math. -14 to the -14 though. 7 minus 21, 7, -14. So instead of writing it as q to the -14th, we can just bring it down to the denominator. So q over 14. Choice A is correct. Let's move on. A company fills boxes with approximately 23 pounds of oranges. To test the accuracy of the filling process, 344 of the oranges were selected at random and weighed. Based on the samples, estimated that the average weight of all boxes of oranges filled by the company in an 8-hour period is 23.1 pounds, with an associated margin of error of 0.19 pounds. Which of the following is the best interpretation of this estimate? So when we're given this margin of error, we're gonna the way to best interpret this is if we're given the average, which we are here, which is 23.1 pounds. If the margin of error is 0.19 pounds, we're going to want to add 0.19 pounds and subtract 0.19 pounds from the average. So it appears that that would equal, let's calculate it, 23.1 minus 0.19. So at the lower end, we have 22.91. And at the higher end, 23.29. So let's look at choice A. Plausible values for the average weight of all boxes of oranges filled by the company are between 22.91 pounds and 23.29 pounds. That seems correct. I'm going to select A. Let's see why B is incorrect. So it says plausible values for the average weight of all boxes of oranges filled by the company are less than 22.91 pounds or greater than 23.29 pounds. So these are just really extreme. Since we have a really small margin of error, it's the estimate is not going to deviate very far from the average that's given, so B is incorrect. Let's continue. For 8, what is the value of x? What value of x is the solution to the given equation? So one way we can do this is just to use Desmos. So why don't we do that? Or I can just be fancy with my TI-89 Titanium Plus and just solve. X equals 42. Excuse me. If we have extra time, we can come back and show you how we can solve this using Desmos, but that should work. Functions f and g are given, and in the function f, b is a constant. If f of x times g of x equals 9x to the fourth minus 26x cubed minus 3x squared, what is the value of b? So the first thing we need to do is just perform the arithmetic. So if we have x times x plus bx, and then multiply that by 9x squared minus 27x. Let's FOIL. So that equals 9x to the fourth plus, I'm gonna run out of room here, plus 9bx cubed plus, or minus rather, minus 27x cubed minus 27b x to the second. So we can just, so since we know that there's only one term that has x to the second, we can set 27bx squared equal to negative it should be negative 27bx squared. Yeah. Equals negative 3x squared, because that's what's represented here. Excuse me. So if we divide by negative 27 on both sides, this should render b is equal to 1/9. Voila. Let's continue. In the xy plane, line S passes through the point 0, 0 and is parallel to the line represented by the equation y equals 18x plus 2. Let's draw a crude chart. So line S passes through 0, 0 and is parallel to 18x plus 2. So it means that the slope is equal to 18. And we know that it also passes through the point 4D. So we know that 18. Since we know that the slope is 18, if we multiply that by 4, we get 72, which should be our correct answer. Notice that line S passes through the point 0, 0, so the y-intercept is 0, as opposed to the equation to which it's parallel, which has a y-intercept of 2, which makes sense. If we evaluate 4, this would produce 74, so it's two units down. Let's continue. 11. The function f is defined by the given equation. For what value of x does f of x reach its minimum? So they're asking us for the x value, not the y. And given the properties of a parabola, we know that it has to be equal. The parabola reaches its minimum at its axis of symmetry, and since we know that the x's, or the zeros rather, are at 44 and 46 respectively, 44 and then 46. Sorry for that crude drawing. Since the distance between the two zeros is 2, 1/2 of that, let's make a line. The line is the midway between the two, so it's 45. Let's continue. 12. In triangle XYZ, y is a right angle. Point P lies on XZ. And line Q lies on YZ, such that PQ is parallel to XY. Cool. That looks right. If the measure of angle XZY, so this angle, if this is equal to 63 degrees, what's the measure of angle XPQ? So we need to find that. So let's find the missing area angle here. So we know that the two other angles in this triangle are 90 and 63. So if we subtract that from 180, that gives us 27 degrees. Also, since PQ is parallel to XY, we know that this angle also must be a right angle. So we have 90 and 90 degrees and another 90 degrees and 27 degrees. Since this entire shape, sorry for that aqua, is a quadrilateral, we can solve the sum of the interior angles should equal 360. So if we subtract 27, 90, and 90, this equal 153. Booyakasha. Instead of 4 consecutive odd integers, where the integers are ordered from least to greatest, the first integer is represented by x. The product of 12 and the fourth odd integer is at most less than the sum of the first and third odd integers. Which inequality expresses this situation? Okay, so since we're dealing with consecutive odd integers, the least odd integer we can represent as x, the second as x plus 2. So for example, if 1 is the least, the next odd integer, consecutive odd integer, would be 3, so we have to add 2 to the initial. And that will continue on. X plus 4 would be the third, and then x plus 6 would be the fourth. The product of 12 and the fourth odd integer, so 12 times the quantity, and here's the fourth, x plus 6, is at most 26 less. So in this case, it cannot, the way we would represent this is less than or equal to, because it cannot exceed 26 more than the sum of the first and third odd integers. So the way we can represent that is the sum of the first, x, and the third, x plus 4, minus 26, because it's as at most 26 less. So A is going to be, A should be a correct answer. Let's continue. In the given system of equations, G and K are constants. The system has infinitely many solutions. What is the value of G over K? So the critical point that we have to recall is that when there are infinitely many solutions, it means that there the lines are equivalent. Excuse me. So the way that we can represent this is, excuse me, so these should be equal to the proportion of the initial equation in the system. So we have 2 to the 5th, 2 over 5 over 7 over 5 should be equal to g over k. So if we just evaluate this, 2 5 divided by 7 divided by 5, it should be equal to 2/7. Boom. The table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of y, where s is a constant. Hey guys, so let's finish with question 15, which reads, the table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of y, where s is a constant. There's a linear relationship between x and y. Which of the following equations represents this relationship? So the first thing that we can do is represent the equation in the form y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. And so m is equal to the slope. We can solve for the slope by taking the change in y over the change in x. So m can be calculated as 24 minus 21 over negative s, or negative 3 over s. Excuse me. And so we can then solve or we can rewrite the equation rather as y equals, or y with the third point, s comma 15, as y minus 15 equals negative 3 over s, the slope, x minus s. So we can distribute the negative 3s to yield negative 3x over s plus 3 is equal to y minus 15. We can combine like terms, excuse me, and bring the x and the y terms on the left side of the equation. So we can have 3x over s plus y I think it makes more sense to get the 18 by isolated on the right, as that's appearing in most of the answer choices. So we can have y equals negative 3x over s plus 18, and then subtract the x term over to the left. So we'll have 3x over s plus y equals 18. And if we just multiply the entire equation by s, the s's will cancel here, and so we'll have 3x plus sy plus 18s. Which is B. Whew! That was a doozy, huh? Okay, so moving on to question 16. Given the system of equations, k is a constant. The system has one distinct real solution. What is the value of k? So there are two different ways that we can do this. I'm thinking that using Desmos is going to be the easiest solution, so let's do that. So we can type in the equations. Y plus k equals x plus 26. We'll have that slider there. Y minus k equals x squared minus 5x. And so if there's exactly one distinct real solution, there should just be one single point of tangency. So we're going to want this red, excuse me, switch over to Bluebook. take a screenshot. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Sorry, y'all. So we're getting closer with the slider at 17. Looks like 17.5 is our solution. Sorry you guys couldn't see it. The function f is defined by f of x equals 1/2 times the quantity x plus 6. What is the value of f of 4? Well, that's really silly. All we have to do is plug in 4 for x, so we'll have 1/2 times 4 plus 6. 4 plus 6 is 10, and 1/2 is 5. D is our answer. The area of a rectangular banner is 2,661 square inches. The banner's length, x, is 24 inches longer than its width in inches. So the way we represent the width is x minus 24. Those two quantities, when multiplied together, should equal 2,661, the area. So which equation represents this? Well, if we distribute the x, we'll have x squared minus 24x, and we have to subtract the 2,661 over from the right side of the equation, so we have minus 2,661 equals 0. That's choice A. Alright, so question 19. A right circular cone has a volume of 71148 pi cubic centimeters, and the area of its base is 4929 pi square centimeters. What is the slant height in centimeters of the cone? Okay, so let's break this down. We know that the volume from the equations given in the reference portion, that the volume of a right cone is 1/3 times pi r squared h. So we first need to solve for the height, the vertical height of the the circular cone. So since we know 71148 pi equals 1/3 we know that pi r squared is equal to the area of the base. So we can just, instead of expressing pi r squared, we can just substitute 5929 pi, as that's given to us in the second part of the first sentence, and then solve for h. So I'm just going to use my calculator here. So bear with me. 711 divided by 5929. So h equals 36. And this is h, is 36 here. Now we need to know what the radius is. So we're given that the area of the base is 5929 pi. So to find the radius, we just can take the square root of 5929, since that equals pi r squared. So let's take the square root, 5929, that equals 77. And so the slant height is going to be this blue. But we know, so this is like the hypotenuse of this right triangle of the slant height. So we know that just by process of elimination, it can't be smaller than any of the side lengths. So we know that D has to be the correct answer. Perfect. Let's continue. So for question 20, we're given, for each real number r, which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation in the xy plane for the given system? So this is the way that we can approach this, is that we can plug the system of equation into Desmos, and then input the different points as a slider to see if if the points continuously are on the line, that's the solution, then that's the actual answer. And instead of selecting answer choice A first, I'm going to go with D. So let's plug it into Desmos. So we can see for D, it appears that it's really directly on the line. And if we use the slider, we see that it continuously lies on the line, so D has to be our correct answer. Woo! That could have been quite lengthy going through it. A, B, and C. So I'm glad that worked out. Let's continue. Almost done. So the cost of renting a carpet cleaner is $52 for the first day and $26 for each additional day. Which of the following functions gives the cost, C of D, in dollars of renting the carpet cleaner for D days, where D is a positive integer? Okay, so the way that we can go about doing it is that we can just substitute in, we can just plug in. So let's imagine that we rent it for 2 days, okay? So we know that the answer has to be equal to 52 because that's the cost for the first day, and then $26 for the second day. So let's 52 plus 26 equals 78. So D is equal to 2 in this situation. So let's plug it into choice A. 26 times 2 plus 26, 78. Voila. We could have used algebra, but that just would have taken longer. So this is a test of speed. Don't feel ashamed to, take the easiest and quickest route possible. Last question. The speed of a vehicle is increasing at a rate of 7.3 meters per second squared. What is the rate in miles per minute squared rounded to the nearest 10? Okay, so let's pay attention to our units and what's being asked of us. Okie dokie. So if we take, this is sort of just like a dimensional analysis problem. So first we have to convert the meters to miles, but we don't need to square it because the only term that's squared is the second squared, which is the time. So we're given that 1 mile is 1609 meters. So we can write 1609 meters for 1 mile. And this will cancel. And so we can get, in order to convert seconds squared, we know that there's 60 seconds squared. So we're going to have to square the 60, which I believe is going to be 3600. To min squared. Yes, it is. This is, sorry guys, 3600. So we can just simply multiply across 7.3 times 3600 divided by 1609 equals 16.9 0.3. So our answer choice is B. And we're done.